I'm just going to I've got a couple of slides I'm just going to close with, and then what we'll do is I've got a few questions here, and then if anybody else has got any other questions, because we have covered one or two as we've been going along. We were going to do a sort of a groupthink exercise, and I think we have got these, but as it's just been a little bit iterative and pivoting the presentation slightly, what I'll do is I'll go away, and as a group we'll actually watch the presentations and the questions and actually come out with some key things, and we'll share these within a week or so that people can think. But there's a few closing thoughts that I just want to give. I think I've only got one slide really, and it's to sort of say, we want you to go away here. You won't have all the answers. Nobody will have the answers. And I can honestly say this. I've worked for some quite large companies. I've worked for GSK for several years. I worked for a Danish biopharmaceutical company as well. And even the large companies don't have all the questions. They bring people in. Okay, they might bring in the likes of McKinsey, BCG and the likes. But even then, they still don't get answers. But what I want to just sort of say is think about things in sort of a stepwise approach. And all of this is very dynamic, so just think of it as like levers. You've got to pull the levers slightly. But I've got this sort of 6 different areas of influence. So I'm breaking it down into the small process. What are going to be your inputs? What's the transformation process that you're going to go? And what is the output that you're wanting to achieve? So this could be the route to market, the value proposition development. What's your knowledge capital? So what do you know? Where are your gaps? Who do you need to bring in? The subject matter experts. Signposting to finance and routes to funding, because there's many different ways, and sometimes it's good to just jot them down and actually talk to people like at events like this, because everybody else have different experience. IP, legal, regulatory support and advice. Know when to access it, and also be careful with who you go to as well, because actually there are a lot of you can actually, anybody can call themselves a consultant. There is actually now a trade body for consultants, but actually there's no sort of standardised accreditation. If I was to call myself actually a dietitian, you can't call yourself a dietitian, because that's actually a protected name, where people can call themselves nutritionalists, or I could be a microbial nutritionist if I want to be. That's why I'm just saying, just be careful with who you speak to, because actually a lot of consultants say, oh, we can help you, but I want 10 grand for that. And actually I know a lot of people that have, and even within the region, have got burnt by going to the wrong sorts of people. Going to say, universities like ourselves or other innovation providers that, in essence, we don't have any skin in the game. We're quite impartial, so we can give that advice. Like really, we're supposed to create impact for the region and wider sort of gross value add. And even like, I gave Bobby a call probably 3-4 weeks ago. I said, can you come and give this talk? And I think you've got your private, it's like, should I be doing that? We're competitors. Well, while we're different universities, we're here to sort of drive sort of value and impact. Think around sort of clinical trials and other research support that you need. Go and talk to the right people. I know it's hard to sometimes knowing who to speak to, but I think it is networking. And then at worst, there are actually organisations that you can actually go out to. There are actually private companies as well that you can draw subject matter experts if you need them, and key opinion leaders. And then
but the key is to do it with the university, because they pull down government funding or EU funding that pays for us. So you leverage what the universities do, because they leverage public money.
And then I think
you need to be.
And then I think the second is just sort of networking and communication activities. So I know a lot of people say networking, but actually there is a style to networking, and it's actually just talking to people and actually always having a think about who you talk to, and then actually remembering people as well. So LinkedIn's brilliant, because I've got over 1,600 people on my network, and if I meet somebody about that, I can actually message them. And actually, I'm not saying message people all the time, but actually, if you're nice to people, most people remember you, and actually they will probably, if you get a message out of the blue, I'm a bit like, oh, they've contacted, how are you doing, George, or whoever. And then I think as well, sort of the communications, just think, we've not really sort of talked on this today, but there is a concept called full circle communication. So it's what you're saying in fora like this today, and what you've got on your website, your value proposition, and what you're sort of if you've got adverts or what you're trying to say, make sure it's all the same messaging, so there's not ambiguity there, and also do it so that people understand. So I always say the intelligent 12-year-old. So make sure that what you're saying, people who are the academic, the subject matter experts, but also the person on the street can understand. Otherwise, people aren't going to understand. I know we're going into the final Q&A, but I'll just sort of just signpost now. But sort of the next steps, we are running another workshop like this, so people are very free to come and to that. And that's nurturing a diverse and sustainable future in the life sciences, a comprehensive approach to equity and inclusion. What we're trying to do with that is actually in two ways. One is look at it from a workforce perspective. Actually, if you are growing a company or if you are a more established company, how can you get a representative workforce? But also, when you're developing products and services, how can they be accessible to people that may be disabled or sort of the PPI elements of patient public involvement? Because actually, the NIHR has been mentioned, but if you're developing a product or a service, it does need to have a PPI element to that. And then, yeah, for any more information, feel free to talk to any of us today, or you can email us, and we'll be sharing the slides and videos at some point. So I think now we'll just go on to this sort of the final Q&A. Does anybody have any immediate questions?
It's not really a question. It's kind of like it's a difficult one for me because I'm doing something that I've not seen being done before, and because it's quite new in the fact that it's new and I've not seen anyone do it. The only thing that's close to it is something that's a global thing that a big CEO has launched. So in terms of, I'm not looking to look for IP or anything, but I'm trying to find ways to field test what I'm doing and try to see. I haven't actually figured out what the business model is yet, but I want to do that by seeing what the gaps in the market and where the challenges are. So I suppose the question is, how is the best way to try and field test or find where the gap in the market is, or try to figure out what the business model is and what I'm trying to do? That's such a vague question, I do apologise.
Are you able to share anything about it?
Yeah, it's basically working with organisations to help them deliver their ESG and their CSR in a new way that's more directed towards climate and achieving net zero within their organisation, and looking round corners of where the government is going to try and put pressure on supply chain management and decarbonisation of supply chains, but actually, which is incredibly complicated and difficult, but there's actually ways to reduce businesses' carbon impact through looking at net good and looking at other ways of doing it, which would be looking at other ways that can help the environment by looking at biodiversity and greening and urban greening. So it's just a different way of thinking about ESG and delivering it in a wider way that's not so much specific about decarbonising supply chains, which is going to take decades to sort that out. But kind of that's the rough idea.
So the only direct experience I have, I'm just working on a project at the moment where I had to look at asthma inhalers. And I've just been blown away this week by finding out that actually the NHS is leading with its net zero strategy. Seriously leading. All the strategies in place, all the policies that's gone in place. And I'm having a focus group next week, I think, with a group of patient public involvement. And again, I've only got, I think it's quite possibly a niche part of what you said. But if you wanted to get some traction with a case study, unbelievably, the NHS is really onto it, and they've done their entire carbon footprint. NICE have already produced patient guidelines about which asthma inhaler to use. I've been so blown away because I think the NHS is, I've just had a conversation with someone about saying the NHS is quite slow. But the university I'm working at, a very similar setup to this, they've just got standard patient public involvement groups. So if you wanted to tailor a question, if you just wanted to access a quick group and you did find something that you could do through the NHS, you can have a patient public involvement group like really quickly at no cost, because that mechanism is set up within some of the universities, and it's already gone through the NHS strategy, net zero. It's gone through the nice guidelines are there. So they've just they did the whole carbon footprint of the NHS, and one of the things that they identified was the propellants in people's asthma inhalers actually are terrible. And it's the whole of the NHS. So it's a big diagram about transport and running hospitals, and then there's a little icon that's a little asthma inhaler. So
it's the equivalent of 180,000 cars on the road.
Yeah, 178,000 Volkswagen cars take off the road.
Yeah.
Just by recycling the asthma.
73,000.
Yeah, and using different propellant. So.
And that's the propellant that's left in the can as the waste.
Yeah.
That isn't the propellant that's already come out,
Yeah.
which is 50 times more.
Yeah. So yeah, keep your really big questions, but if you suddenly needed to, just dig in somewhere, contact me, and we'll talk about it.
Is that Leicester?
No.
Different one.
But it's the same European money that's got us in this room today, where universities are helping small businesses.
Do you have any comments on that?
No, I was going to say, obviously the universities are there to sort of guide you. I think they have a vast pool, for trials, or they've got the conditions. I think that's one of the key things to have a look at is working with one of the universities and seeing if they can support you on these things.
Or actually, even because I'm sort of thinking we can get to. For my familiarity is patient public involvement, but you mentioned it's corporate social responsibility, isn't it? What approach? The university per se should be kind of onto this. So I don't know whether you could
You've got CSR, ESG, and EID. And normally those three together, what you'll find with businesses is that they're bringing that together like a Venn diagram, and it's called. A lot of people call it net good. So it's called net good.
Yeah.
And net good, some of it's quantifiable, some of it's not. It's because some of it's about. Some of it's not measurable, some of it is, but some businesses now, the more progressive ones, are just looking at the net good policy. So carbon's in there as well, pollution, circularity, obviously inclusion, diversity, equality, and then CSR, which is just the nice things or the other things that you do. It's all being put into one thing. But
so each of these universities should have somebody, because the university is a business. So I don't know if these guys can find out who in their university.
The best response I'm getting is from the university. So well, 16 different universities. They're all really hot on it and they're up for partnership. It's everyone else that's the problem. And it's some of the bigger businesses and SMEs to try and they're gonna have to do this. This is a question of when. I'm just trying to encourage them, one, to do it sooner, and two, to think of it in a new way, and actually rather than trying to do everything themselves, because what happens is they go, right, you in marketing, you're going to look after our ESG, make us look at our carbon footprint and try and look at community engagement. And they're sat there thinking, well, I just do marketing. Where actually the skill sets aren't always in the organisations, where actually that's where you said, let's bring in people that can do this, that are doing it I've got the network, who know the charities, who know the community groups, know how to do the engagement, i.e. me.
So can I just say, one thing that's sort of coming from sort of what everyone said, like we were talking earlier about sort of like medical devices, the consumables. Now, if you want to get engagement with companies, and the fact that NHS, you said the NHS are really hot on it, what about actually going directly to the companies that are supplying NHS and the NHS supply chain with consumable products? So you've got your single-use laparoscopic instruments, you've got your urology devices companies, your leg bags, your catheters, intermittent catheters, the ones that you use each time you need to go to the toilet, creates so much wastage, it's incredible. And there are a lot of people, the bigger companies like the Coloplasts, are very good at pushing the intermittent catheters because that's where they make the most money. Whereas the smaller companies are potentially getting guidelines because they're saying, well, actually that patient is housebound, bedridden, why do they need an intermittent catheter? You can actually have an indwelling catheter instead. So maybe you highlight those the companies that do consumables to the NHS, and start having the conversations with them, and most of them will be looking at creating a USP. And if part of USP is actually we're greener, we're more, we're more efficient, we're reducing our carbon footprint, we've brought in, a company to help us do this, might actually help them add value to their value proposition.
We'll get to win them more work as well, because most supply chain management now, tier 3, they're getting asked to do X, Y, and Z. That actually, most of these companies are like, I haven't got a clue where to start, where actually being involved in this network will help them and win more jobs, because the procurements are asking for these things now.
Try companies like Wellspect, Clini Supplies would be another company I would probably go to, because they're a British company, and even though they're getting their products partly from India, they're trying to create more products here. There's another one called Renew Medical, Purple Surgical would be another one. Medtronic might be an option for you as well.
Okay, cool.
But I'd probably start with those and just see if they would be interested.
Can I just add one thing as well? I used to work at GSK in the Medical Research Centre, what was quite similar to this, but it was in Stevenage. And I was talking to someone there, and they'd actually developed so I think in the rounds, companies are doing some of it, but it might not be, actually sometimes it is actually their own know-how and IP. And they developed in essence, a painkiller. But actually, and it was really efficacious in the clinical trials. The one problem is in the manufacture, it actually, in the intermediate step, they created a compound that was actually more explosive than TNT. And they actually and they got different mechanisms on how they could make these compounds, and they actually decided to go with a less efficacious compound, because actually it would have been unsafe to manufacture. Now I know that's slightly not sort of in the green. But actually, if you're looking at your big companies that are making things, there are probably decisions being made that are probably now more linked to sort of water and other things like that. So, say rather than using solvents, can they use water in that process and other things like that? Really,
water does add a whole other issue when it comes to disposal of chemicals, because you still have to bury the water because it's still classed as contaminated water. So while it does say, oh yeah, it is green,
greenwashing, literally.
But we are coming through a whole load of new technologies, so like flow kits and that sort of thing that take away the use of any solvents. Neat reactions are becoming a thing when you're scaling up to pilot size and that sort of thing. So it is there in the industry when it comes to GSK, but it's probably not very widely known because it's just the industry.
Okay, cool.
Super. Are there any other? Cause I've got a few questions I've got here, but I was just wondering if there's any other sort of questions from the table. I think this might actually be your question. It's, what advice would you give to someone just starting out?
Yeah. So like I've literally 2 weeks ago, I was at the bench. I was bench chemist, and I'm only just coming into like the commercial world of like actually selling science and that sort of thing. So yeah, just what advice would you guys give?
And who are you working for?
Charnwood Molecular.
Doing what specifically?
So I've just joined the marketing team as a marketing executive, so learning the ropes in that sort of aspect. But yeah.
And marketing about what? Charnwood Molecular?
Yeah, so the service that Charnwood Molecular do, so that's business to business, going into other biotechs and seeing whether we can help them do the science that they can't do in their systems, and it's usually drug related, so making pharmaceuticals.
So I think when I've worked for organisations, I think the way I categorise it is you have your hot leads, people that you've dealt with, people that you've got your relationship with. Sometimes they just need that love back again, or you haven't been in contact or nothing's changed. So I normally start there. It's always nice to start there. And then you work your way around, and networking events, as we said, are really good. Look, read the right journals or follow the right people on Twitter, see what's happening. feel free to comment if you've got, value to add. But that's a big way of sort of letting people know you're out there. It is social media is able to do so much things. I think I couldn't have launched my brand without social media. I went through the idea of working through bloggers, but before you used to have to pay so much for magazines or something. So it is, you can, I think you just got to follow the right people. Look at your customers, look at who they deal with maybe, and look what your competitors are doing. And that's the way I would approach it. But your hot leads are your easiest ones. You've already got that relationship, and there's always opportunities sometimes to expand on those.
I've watched the film about Theranos, the Antonio does know about marketing.
Okay.
That's brilliant marketing.
In order to go to jail. I mean, she's like on a delayed jail sentence.
She's well, let's say.
Yeah, she is.
It is a good film.
Good film, yeah.
Well, it shows you how to market. It shows you how to get products to market that you haven't got.
Don't feel bad if you're not a squillionaire in a year's time, because
To drop out.
It's all like a genuine and honest approach, and if you just said, look, I'm new to this, and the company's got great skills, and I'm just lacking connections, people will see you, just what you can do. I think people like raw honesty, and people like innocence, and actually don't like being sold to. So just offer to help. Selling's about solving problems, really. If you solve problems, you don't sell. So just try and market in that way, I would. And maximise anyone whom you know that can introduce you. Because a warm introduction is 100 times better than.
Are you going to do direct selling?
No, we've got a BD team, so I'm just marketing the.
I put some case studies together as well of your customers already with their approval, and say this is what we did. Are there any others out there like that? So just make a big song and dance about what you have been doing and how well you've been doing it, and get it into the social media.
I'd also comment. I worked for about 6 years in a medical communications or pharmaceutical marketing agency, and there's a lot of people that think themselves marketeers, and to be honest, you can come out with a lot of buzzwords and everything else like that, but if you're a scientist and come into the marketing field, so I'd probably say they can't do it the other way. So I would actually recommend getting just a fundamental textbook on marketing, having a look at that, and then it is literally just getting out there and the experience. And people can have different thoughts, and people, not say disagreements, but different things, but a lot of it is, say if you were to buy a t-shirt, why would you buy say a Nike t-shirt over say a Zara t-shirt, over a H&M t-shirt, over a Fendi t-shirt? And they all
Favourite brand.
The reason that I say that is you can actually do a test. There's an exercise, and I did think about doing it today. It's called the white t-shirt.
Not the wet t-shirt.
No. And in essence, that t-shirt might cost 50p to make, but depending on the brand you put on that can be. But then with each of those brands, people think about different things. So if you've got a Nike or Under Armour or Gymshark, I'm going to wear it to the gym, or it'll be. Whereas if it's Balenciaga or it's a lot more expensive, and it's a lot of the things that you see every day are out there. So yeah, I'll probably get do a lot of reading and YouTube and things. Actually, the CMI is quite good as well. So there's there's this Chartered Institute of Marketing, or there's the Chartered Management Institute as well, and they both sort of do different things, and they've got quite good website and resources just for the fundamentals.
And you're based here, aren't you? So there's a lot of stuff's going to happen here on your doorstep. So
have a chat to Lucy as well.
Milk that for all it's worth, because compared to a small company that's based on a business park somewhere.
There's two, and I realise that people are probably getting ready for lunch, but there's two more questions, and I think these should be quite quick. So the other one for the panel is, when accessing the NHS regulatory bodies, what should a startup start doing early?
talking.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, talk to them. Just get alongside them.
Yeah.
They need to co-develop it with you. Have you got your patient public?
No, not yet. No. So, like I said, at the moment we're in mostly the private sector with private counsellors and therapists. We're just having universities start using it with their students for proactive student mental health, for example. And we're in the very early stages of potentially a pilot with NHS Norfolk. So we just passed the ethics board review.
Perfect.
So I guess things like that. It's just more saying, with the wealth of experience, is there something that I could be doing in year one that I could be doing now, rather than saying, God, I wish I'd done X or Y 2 years ago to save me time. So by the sounds of it, it's just building up networking, approaching innovative trusts. Not all next
What
one.
I would add to that, Sean, is whilst you're doing the studies,
Yeah.
also put a dignitary's name against it or write a paper.
Okay. Yeah.
With those studies, like a clinical paper that
Yeah.
what are the qualitative results and what are the
Yeah.
quantitative results
Yeah.
and what is the actual recommendation through that.
Okay.
Because that will hold you in good stead when you go to the regulatory side,
Got it.
especially for what you're trying to develop.
Yes. Yeah.
Because that will give you obviously nice guidance, that's what they're looking for, journal papers, etc., and evidence. And it's the evidence is showing that, actually what we're doing is having a profound impact on patients and people using it. So that's what you want is, what's your impact on the health of the nation, basically.
That's really helpful, thank you.
There are a few psychiatrists that I should hopefully be able to put you in touch with that are actually really innovative and very forward thinking.
Amazing.
One actually has bipolar himself. And he's Staffordshire based. Another one was head of learning disabilities. But if you can get a couple of psychiatrists on board with you, that will make a big difference. Just coming on from what Bridget said.
Perfect.
And then just building up the anecdotal evidence.
Yeah.
So where it's being used right now, private, etc. What percentages have they seen patients improve, etc. You get all of that, and formulate and tabulate it into like some sort of document. That should help.
That's really helpful, thank you.
Just need to make sure you are abiding by GDPR and all the rest.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally. Yeah. That's really helpful, thank you.
Jane's got a slide that.
Yeah, so this might answer. This sort of addresses. This is the world. This is the world that I've lived in, which is like this, and this is just basic research up here. This is where we started doing bench research. All of these are government support and funding mechanisms to improve the NHS. And there's a magic word, the NHS is supposed to adopt things, which it absolutely doesn't. So we've mentioned it, the Academic Health Science Network, they have pots of money for you as well.
Well, do I have to justify it at all? Or just send it?
But I think
if you say please,
you know,
questions.
We hear about all these projects that get funded massively, but they all seem to be government ministers, don't they?
well, we can't, or pub landlords. You know, what did we do? So we've talked about the NHS supply chain that's down here. We've just mentioned NICE. It's now care and clinical excellence. But actually, the Academic Health Science Network and what's the other one we mentioned? No, they're specifically there to fund research that's co-development of products. And NIHR. Thank you. Massive funding networks. They have fellows. They have schemes. So I think you need to partner with somebody that's interested. You know, you need your clinical partner or your research partner.
Is that slide in your presentation as well?
No.
Is that the next
one? I can add that in.
Please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Really good.
But we can just chat about this.
Yeah.
You know, government has funded this for a long time, and you need to just get in there and partner with them. So talk to them, find your local.
I think as well that there's sort of different calls as well, and there's different funding bodies. So just as an example, like the NHR, they have a call.
Oh, sorry, here we are. NIHR. That's why I couldn't spot it. Look, all of these are funded.
Yeah. So they have a funding call called FAST. That is specifically, I think it's between £50,000 and £150,000 for SMEs to actually try and get that over that sort of next hurdle. But then you've got the Innovate UK that's sort of industry-led, translational research.
Have you had Innovate UK money?
No, we haven't taken any money yet.
Okay, but then there's also there's the charities as well. So charities fund quite a lot of money. But the thing is, the reason that I say it's good to work with the university, because if you went to a company and said, oh, we've got this brilliant device, sort of Jane as an assessor of smart grants and other things like that might be like, okay, who else is, whereas if you say you've got a university on board, an NHS trust, and then actually a letter of support from say a doctor or prescribers that are going to use it, so you've actually got a clear thread throughout that along the whole of the value chain. It gives you your application a lot more. So the thing is, with all the applications, there are a lot of translational sort of things that are there. So is there a market opportunity? Who's your team? What's the product? If you can articulate those, and then sometimes it's just like it's just tailoring the application depending on what it is. Because so like a smart grant is agnostic for everything. So I could come up with a radioactive train, a nuclear powered train if I wanted, and get funding for it. So you're up against everything, or a new way to make chocolate and other things like that. So, but sometimes calls like that can be quite good. But actually, then there's specific calls. So like there's been quite a few of late in the mental health space actually, but they're different funders, or there could be, and then sometimes they're smaller pots of money, or they're very specific on what they want to work for.
And we need. I was here the last time I was here. There was the local AHSN chap speaking, who I actually know from previous days, and I can't remember his name. I know him. So we need to get you the names of the AHSN and the NIHR. They do have local people on the ground. That should be your way in.
Or to complicate things even further, there's actually pots of money that say a programme like ourselves. So there's a number of programmes at the University of Leicester that they are given, say, £5-6 million by a funding body, say the NIHR, Wellcome Trust, Cancer Research UK, and then they are running, say, capacity building by doing PhDs, the normal sort of teaching stuff, but then they've got research on the side, and actually some of that might be translational, and they've got actually pots of money to give as well. So it's actually the universities that are actually administering those pots of money on behalf of and that's not even talking about business angels, venture capitalists, other sort of network organisations, OBN, Medilink. So Medilink's actually got its own pots of money as well, but with the ERDF funding coming to an end, that's changed a little bit. I'm just minded on the time, and I'm getting a little bit hungry myself, but there's just one final question what I think is quite good, and I'm not sure who this is from, but it's where do you see the future of the medical industry in terms of the expanding demand?
I think they're trying to centralise a lot of things, but it's going to start falling under patient demand at the end of the day. So at the moment it's still being controlled by the trusts and by NHS supply chain, and they're trying to sort of like regulate it. But what that's doing is actually pushing a lot of the SMEs outside, because they don't have necessarily the money to be able to offer tenders. Because when you are putting a tender forward, a lot of the bigger companies are tendering products that are classed as loss leaders, so they can afford to give the bags away for, I'm saying, for example, urology leg bags, they can afford to give them away for a penny each, because they know they're going to be making 400% out in the community. So that's where the issue lies, and I think if that is deregulated and the NHS supply chain stop an exclusive tender process and make it more inclusive, it could potentially open up the doors to everybody. But I think as we go down, I think the NHS eventually is going to start being disbanded, and we're going to start seeing a more privatised system coming in, and that's going to open up the doors for a lot more innovation, because those who've got money can afford the better, more sort of like more high-end products or drugs, etc. That's just my opinion, and it's just what I've seen happening.
Yeah, and my experience with businesses like some of these in the room is, I think with yours, there's the assumption that the NHS will deliver everything, and if anyone wants the strategy reports that come from government and from the big consulting groups, it's about what self-care is. So I think there's a lot more traction if you've got a product that you can just sell to people because why would you go near the NHS? But we have a philosophy in this country that says if you're poorly, you have to go to the gatekeeper, which is your GP. And then everyone's launching all these apps and people, and you go, who is more interested in looking, this is a real bandwagon of mine, who is more interested in looking after their health than actually the individual? So the NHS long-term plan does recognise that self-care and self-management, it's to do with, the diabetes monitors and everything like that. We're blurring the boundaries because people can do self-management, and we should want them to do self-management. But there's a big bit of the NHS that, they still like the GP to be the gatekeeper, even though they're overburdened and all the rest of it. But the national strategy, NHS long-term plan, is that you should allow self-management.
You say that from a user perspective of, I don't use GP, but more and more, becoming more difficult to get an appointment, to see somebody. What I seem to get at home is a lot of these emails to say you can do an online test for this, or all sorts of stuff, apps there and then. I'm guessing you're right that it's going to go more towards
the advances of technology, isn't it? Bringing in so much in everyday life. I think there is.
But there are those things that can be quantified. But if you're talking about, say, something like mental health, that can't be quantified by things. Because when I was working for Lumbeck, sort of a mental health organisation, and they have the DSM-4, you answer those questions. You literally, every single person that answers them is classified as depressed or severely depressed. And you may not know that you're depressed, but it's just the way those questions are. So technology is great for some things, when it is sort of like respiratory, diabetes, cardiovascular, etc. It's not going to be a great thing to diagnose. So it's diagnostic tools, not for mental health, but in terms of support tools, mental health, definitely the way forward. And so you're right, technology, you've said it well, technology is the way forward, but it's how quickly are people going to start embracing it, because they have got your online GPs now, where if you can't get in front of your own GP, you can go to one of the online organisations and speak to a GP immediately, but there is a cost element to that. So it's I think the divide between healthcare, between those who can afford it, will go private and will start to pay for their own, and those who can't will rely on the NHS. And I think we're going to be getting a very disjointed healthcare system in place, where it is going to be very much down to economics.
Especially off the NHS if people go private.
Yeah. Well, I think as a medical industry per se, I think the future is better from an SME point of view, because your products that you're developing are innovative products, so it makes sense to really touch base with the right clinicians who are going to be helping that product get to the market, because at the end of the day you want patients who are self-managing. The NHS is overburdened, they don't want to be carrying on with that, they want patients to be self-managing. If there are tools and devices and innovations that are being backed up by studies and clinical work, then why not? So I think it's positive, but there's also a slight downer on whether patients will take it on board. And I think it's not about the patients as such. Yes, patients at the end of the day, but I think it's about the clinicians also changing their mindset to looking at these new innovations. That's, in my experience, what I'm finding. There are a lot of clinicians who are really, really savvy, and they want to do new things, and they want to create new products and services.
Just a trend that I've seen. So I've worked in the industry for probably about 15, 16 years now, and there's a lot around sort of patient centricity. So and what I mean by that is actually no one patient is alike, and actually if you come back as a first principle, you can say what is health. Because actually, if you say what is health, to me it could be, I want to go to the gym, I want to run half marathon and everything else like that. You say that to a person with multiple sclerosis, and they want to be able to sort of walk, say, 20 metres, because that can mean that they can go to the toilet. Now, actually, I worked on a drug where they didn't articulate the value proposition enough, and it actually didn't get approved by the EMA and the MHRA. So it was actually latterly, but actually that would have enabled people to sort of walk. It wasn't disease modifying. It was actually more of a, it was to allow people to do that. But there are a lot of trends that are going on. So there's some grand challenges that the NHS face, but also some other trends. So I'd say just have a read of the sort of what is in the narrative and everything else like that. And a lot of people are talking around sort of post-COVID, but there's a lot of organisations sort of like in the supra level, like sort of the World Health Organization, say GARD. There's Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and actually what is getting distilled from those are actually having an impact on the NHS and innovation, but also in other territories as well. So it's good to have a look at those. I know it's very life sciences based, Bob, but I don't know if you've seen any observations from your sort of in the wider industry. Any?
Yeah, I think sustainability obviously are the key things that we're all looking at. Technology is bringing that in as well. I think there is going to, especially from the outside end, I think there is going to be that gap between the private and public sort of thing. People that can afford it are going to end up paying for things that they need to, and that's even on products. I think companies will look at where they can add commercial value to more of their products. Really, I think they're seeing the changes in the NHS, and they looking at more commercial ways of doing that. Really.
But so I think we're near enough about close. But I was just going to say to the panel, if you've got one final closing remark or thoughts. So I know we can have some lunch.
Well, for me,
good man, Bobby. Good. Go.
From life sciences, it is quite complicated, the NHS system, and I think you need to pull on resources where you can, because I know the basic stuff, but there is a lot of guidelines that you need to follow or have those connections. So pull on the resources that are available out there.
I just want to say, James, thank you and your team for actually organising something like this, because yes, we're sat at the front giving our sort of sharing our knowledge, but actually we're learning a lot from everybody that's in the room as well. So thank you for putting such a great event together.
Yeah, I think you're a very mixed bag. So I think some of you have been more pertinent to you, but I think we should get you some contact details for the other networks that we interact with. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, feel free. This team are really good at signposting people, so mercilessly exploit them. Anna's, that's fine.